Hey guys, Trey here. Looks like spring is starting to ramp up here as we have several days with severe weather potential across the southern plains, central and southern plains, starting tomorrow. This is the current day 2 outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. Slight risk there in eastern Kansas, followed by another day of sort of a marginal severe threat in the southern plains, and then we get into several days here in a row, day 4, 5, and 6, with potential severe threats and possibly beyond that. So wanted to do a discussion today focusing on the Wednesday through Saturday period. Couple days looking pretty good out of this stretch, but there are some definite negatives, as there are with pretty much any early season event or sort of forecast. So let's get started here. This is the big picture on the satellite. You can see beautiful swirl over here on the satellite view off the Pacific Northwest coast. That is going to be our weather maker here for the southern plains come Wednesday and onward into the weekend. If we zoom in closer here, we can see very nice warm moist advection already underway. You can see those kind of cloud streets here. Very strong southerly flow in place right now in the low levels, drawing that moisture slowly northward. And you can see sort of some southwesterly flow here across the desert southwest. You're going to get a chance of rain in the southwest. There's a chance of thunderstorms today in California. Chance of showers in the southwest tonight into early tomorrow possibly. And then we get the system, the trough, to first piece of energy from the trough kind of to eject into the plains. And the first day we'll focus on is going to be tomorrow. Like we said, slight risk in eastern Kansas, extending a marginal risk down into Oklahoma. So if we take a look at our surface data, we can see a better reflection of that southerly flow at the surface. Very strong winds across the southern plains. You can see dew points in the upper 50s here across South Texas, getting drawn northward. Low to mid 50s here along the Red River into central Oklahoma. So that's a good sign. The atmosphere is moistening, although the Gulf is fairly cold. I saw some news recently that the Gulf, some of the buoys in the Gulf were showing their record cold temperatures since records began some number of years ago. So the Gulf is actually cold, which we thought might hamper sort of moisture return. And for these first couple days here, the moisture return is going to be somewhat, not sporadic, but somewhat sort of meager, if you will. Kind of typical of early season events, kind of upper 50s to maybe low 60s, but generally mid to upper 50s is going to be what we're going to see. Let's take a look at the quality of the moisture here. These are the observed soundings from this morning. So let's start at Brownsville. We can see a pretty deep moist layer up to about 800 millibars here. That's a good sign. That moist air mass that's going to be advecting northward is going to be fairly deep. There is a very pronounced dry layer aloft, what could be some semblance of an elevated mixed layer coming sort of advecting eastward with the southwesterly flow aloft into the southern plains. If we go up to Corpus Christi here, same kind of deal. Del Rio, same kind of deal. Very deep moist layer there again as well, up to about 800 millibars there also. But we still see some semblance of this sort of elevated mixed layer. So very strong elevated mixed layer is the really striking thing about these soundings. Let's take a look at Dallas-Fort Worth. Again, we see very steep lapse rates in the mid-levels, very warm air in the mid-levels. So first thing to really take out of this is that we're going to see a very strong elevated mixed layer tomorrow. And whether or not that suppresses storms for the entire day is yet to be seen, but it's looking like this is going to be very, very resilient to the sort of kind of weakish forcing that we're going to have tomorrow. And we'll take a look at that in a second. And then we'll finally look at Oklahoma City. Steep lapse rates aloft there as well in the mid-levels. But a couple things we saw was that EML and very deep moist layer extending to about 800 millibars or so. So that's a good sign as far as moisture goes, moisture quality goes. Let's go ahead and zoom out. This is the mesoanalysis here from the SPC. Quick look at the surface. There's a surface low up here centered across sort of the North Dakota-Minnesota border area. Supposed to get some snow up there tomorrow, with kind of a secondary reflection of a surface low down here in eastern Colorado. It's helping to sort of drive that southerly flow. And you can see kind of a strong pressure gradient here across Oklahoma and Texas. Very windy here today. Winds in the 20-mile-an-hour sort of range with higher gusts here today in Norman. But that's going to help promote that southerly flow, get that warm, moist air up here. If let's go ahead and take a look at 500 millibars here. We can see that sort of jet, sort of max associated with that upper level trough, sort of impacting the desert southwest right now, Baja California. That is going to promote continual sort of Lee cyclogenesis. That surface low going to be kind of reinforced here with kind of continual surface low sort of development here in the southern plains just to the lee of the Rockies. So that's good. It's going to keep that surface low there, keep that southerly flow intact. We go down to 850 millibars here. Kind of we see that semblance of the low-level jet extending all the way from central Texas up into southern Canada there. Very strong surface low up there that we saw on the surface map. This is the reflection of that at 850 millibars. Very strong low-level jet across the plains. So moisture transport itself shouldn't be a problem. Moisture quality we saw was pretty good. So all in all, for an early to mid-March setup, definitely not looking too terrible in the moisture department. I've seen a lot worse for March setups, and this one, pretty good moisture quality here. Again, deep moist layer, and very strong low-level jet with sort of, I'd expect to see continued sort of Lee cyclogenesis here to keep that moist southerly flow going. Let's look at 700 millibars real quick. Pick out our short waves. We see one sort of short wave there, kind of centered around the sort of Yuma area, Yuma, Arizona area. One short wave kind of right in there in eastern Kansas, or western Kansas, eastern Colorado. But all in all, looks pretty good as far as getting ingredients in place. Now let's see how the models sort of handle this trough that's going to be moving in. So this is the 12Z NAM, so the morning run of the NAM. And we'll go ahead and move this forward. We see sort of that piece of energy, little initial piece of energy here tonight. Shouldn't really be too much in the way of any precipitation. The moisture really isn't quite in place yet. Very shallow moisture profile so far up here. So I wouldn't expect too much in the way of showers this evening. But as we move into tomorrow, that main sort of belt of enhanced flow aloft starts to move into the southern plains. And we start to see this nice troughiness up here centered on Nebraska and Kansas. This is 21Z. So late afternoon tomorrow, Wednesday. And sort of the broad southwesterly and westerly flow around this sort of closed low here off the coast of California, Northern California. So this is our first piece of energy. You can see it's kind of displaced a little bit to the north of where our sort of true moisture axis is going to be. So forcing here might be an issue. And we saw on those soundings that very significant sort of EML already in place across the southern plains. That's going to take quite a bit of forcing to erode that cap during the day on Wednesday. And whether or not this is enough of a glancing blow to sort of get the job done, I have my doubts. We can go and kind of zoom in here, and we'll take a look at 700 millibars here. That's where the level I like to pick out my short waves. But here's tomorrow, and this is going to be at 18Z. You can kind of see the forcing is starting to trail off to the north of the region. I'll go to the Central Plains sector here. This is 21Z tomorrow. You can see that very well-defined mid-level trough, mid-level closed low there. And your main belt is kind of off to the northeast. So I have my questions and my reservations about getting storms along sort of this dry line cold front during the day tomorrow. If we go down to the surface here, we can see sort of the surface features better. As we go into tomorrow, we see this surface low up here in northwest Kansas. This is overnight. We kind of see that redevelopment there, like we were talking about with that continued southwesterly flow. And here's sort of our here's our cold front draped across northeast Kansas down into western Oklahoma, with kind of, if we look at our moisture, our surface dew points here, we're gonna have a nice sort of dry line in place across West Texas, cold front sagging down through southern Kansas into western Oklahoma. But along this cold front, are we going to see enough forcing to overcome that cap? And I don't think so. This is not the most convergent cold front, convergent boundary I've ever seen. If we look here, this is 21Z Wednesday, we see definitely southerly winds, but sort of south-southwesterly winds behind the cold front. Yeah, so I just don't think we're going to see enough forcing to get storms tomorrow. Now, overnight, after dark, that's a different story. So if we go after dark, we have all that moisture in place. Going to see continued warm advection. There's sort of that cold front sags. Actually, that might be sort of the representation of the dry line there, the true dry line, with the cold front kind of just sagging up there. Yeah, that'll be the cold front up there. That's going to be your dry line. Pardon me. But after dark, I think along that cold front, as it forces its way, kind of sags its way to the south, here on the NAM run at least, that should provide enough sort of localized forcing along the cold front for to break that instability, or break that convective inhibition and get storms overnight, kind of in this warm advection regime. Likely will be elevated, likely a chance to be undercut by this cold front, likely to be a storm mode that's not favorable for much else other than maybe some damaging wind gusts, maybe hail in the early portion of the storm's life cycle. But all in all, I just don't think we're going to see enough forcing here, large-scale forcing and also forcing along this sort of dry line to get storms during the day in western Oklahoma. Now, the one caveat is, if we can get a storm to go, and I think these dew points are a little bit high, and I'll take a look at that in a second, kind of comparing them to the current observations, but if we take a sounding there kind of along the dry line, Kansas-Oklahoma border tomorrow afternoon, we can see we still have some inhibition left, but we're very close to getting that cap to break. And if the cap were to break, if we did have enough forcing, photographs are definitely favorable for supercells, potentially with some very large hail, maybe a tornado or two. So the environment is definitely in place here by early evening, if that cap can break, for a pretty solid supercell event with all severe hazards possible. But again, the question, and it's a big question, are we going to get enough forcing to erode that cap tomorrow afternoon to get daytime storms? Just don't think so. While we're on the topic here, let's go ahead and look at kind of these past few NAM runs here and see how they're doing. See how we're doing with regard to moisture return. That's going to be a big key here. So this is the 12Z NAM from yesterday morning, Monday morning, valid, and our time right now, almost 2 p.m. So let's take it to this will be, let's take it to 18Z. So this will be noon. We see this run had mid-50s dew points up here in southern Oklahoma, sort of patchy 60s dew points here in far south Texas. And if we compare that to our surface chart here, we see that's not quite the case. A little bit overdone here in southern Oklahoma, kind of maybe by a couple degrees, seeing anywhere from like 49 to 52, 53 here. There's a 54 down there, so maybe it's not too terrible. Definitely not really seeing any 55-degree dew points. As far as 60 dew points go, we're not even seeing those really in South Texas as much as the NAM was showing yesterday morning. So Overall, I think the 12Z run yesterday maybe overdoing dew points just a little bit. Um, Here is the 0Z. Actually, let's go to 0Z for the 9th, which would be 6 p.m. Central Time yesterday. Let's go to Tuesday at 18Z again. Better reflection here on 0Z. We see sort of broad low 50s dew points across Oklahoma. Again, not quite seeing this sort of plume of 60s up here in South Texas, Central and South Texas here. We're seeing a high 50s, so again, maybe a few degrees overdone with the dew points here for Wednesday. Let's see how today's run did. Again, kind of a little bit overdone here. Getting 56 dew points up here in southern Oklahoma, that's not the case yet, so I would be a little bit wary of the NAM looking at tomorrow's setup as far as moisture goes. A little bit overdone here. Whether that is going to have a huge effect on the setup remains to be seen. But in a setup like this where we need that cap to break, we want as much as moist and unstable of a sort of boundary layer as we can get, moist and unstable low levels as we can get to help burst that capping inversion from that EML. So the fact that we're a little bit lacking on the dew points compared to the model runs here is a little bit concerning. It remains to be seen if that's going to have a huge impact on what we see tomorrow as far as our ability to get daytime storms. Let's go ahead and go through some cams, everybody's favorite, the cams. Let's start with the HER. Got the 18Z runs coming in now, fresh, hot off the press. So we'll go right to our HER run. So this is 18Z. So just coming in now. And if we go through the day on Wednesday, yep, just not a whole lot in the way of storms here before 0Z or 6 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. And then right about 1, 2Z, we start to see those storms fire along that cold front. Not much down here in Oklahoma, just not quite enough forcing, a little bit too much capping here in Oklahoma, but we get quite a few storms along that sagging cold front in Kansas, likely going to be elevated, like we said, and probably will have the chance of producing large hail early in their life cycle and some damaging winds later on. Let's take a look now at the WRF ARW. This is from this is a 12Z run, and more of the same. Just don't see any sign of convection here during the day on Wednesday. But again, after dark, we see that semblance of the storms starting to fire along that cold front in eastern Kansas. Maybe a chance here in northern Oklahoma, but this will be well after dark, likely going to be part of the warm advection regime, which is usually a producer of elevated storms. So that's enough about Wednesday. Let's start talking about Thursday here real quick. Thursday is going to be a little bit more of a conditional threat. We've talked about how conditional Wednesday's threat is going to be. Thursday is even more conditional, and I'll show you why here. I see Thursday as kind of one of the transition days here between when this trough really starts to eject and that first piece of energy starts to come out. So Wednesday, that first piece of energy will be the player, and then we're kind of going to have a little bit of a lull here before this closed low starts to really eject into the plains. And if we look here at 0Z on so 6 p.m. Central Time Thursday, kind of see this ridging across the plains. And as we know, ridging is associated with subsidence or sinking motion, which is unfavorable for thunderstorms generally. What we do have in place, though, is that cold front. That cold front is still going to be in place. It's not really going to crash through. It's going to kind of sag here and kind of effectively sort of stall out here in the afternoon, sort of here in northern and central Oklahoma. Sort of your dry line out here in West Texas. So definitely can see a conditional threat of supercells here, severe thunderstorms along this cold front on Thursday. Likely going to be confined to the cold front because we'll have that EML in place still. And not really much forcing to deal with on the large scale since we're going to have that sort of ridging in place. Photographs not really favorable for tornadoes so much. We will have a little bit of instability, it looks like, along that cold front. But is it going to be enough? Is that cold front going to be enough to get storms to go in the absence of any real forcing? It's a little bit more of a question than tomorrow, Wednesday, I think. So that remains to be seen. Let's take another sounding here just for good measure. Again, there is a marginal risk for Thursday out by the SPC from southwest Missouri down into the Texas South Plains. And yeah, photographs don't look very favorable. We see some evidence of capping. So Thursday, again, a very, very conditional threat for severe thunderstorms, mainly across Oklahoma, central Oklahoma here. And then we move on into the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This is when the main trough is actually going to start ejecting into the plains. And let's take a look at kind of the progression here. This is the GFS. Friday, again, a little bit of that ridging going to be remaining across the southern plains. I don't know if we're going to have enough forcing in this region to get storms to go. Just by the looks of this, again, SPC has a day 4 outlook out for Oklahoma. We're centered on much of Oklahoma there. If we go to Friday afternoon, we'll just go ahead and take a sounding here, western Oklahoma, and see what we can see from this sounding. Yeah, we can see that the main belt of enhanced flow aloft is not quite here yet. The forcing's not quite here yet. We do have a little bit of instability. Photographs definitely not looking favorable, though, for tornadoes. Severe storms, yes. Definitely see severe storms if we can get storms to fire. Let's look at 0Z and take a sounding here real quick. And by this time, we have definitely a nice moisture plume going on in the southern plains, low 60s dew points. That is definitely what we like to see for these early season setups. Again, meager instability. Photographs not that favorable. We just don't have the forcing there yet, the main belt of enhanced flow aloft. Now, Saturday is when we start to get what they're calling this sort of Pacific front to come through. Kind of this cold front feature that's going to push through. Let's see what we can get. Take some soundings here. This is just a quick kind of overview. And this is a little bit more favorable for maybe tornadic supercells here. More instability here along that sort of dry line Pacific front here, with a little bit more curvature in the photographs, kind of here along the Red River, southwest Oklahoma. This is at 0Z, just south of the Red River, ahead of that dry line sort of bulge. And we do see some curvature in the low levels, a little bit of a weakness there in the mid levels, a little bit of veer back veer there, but we've seen that doesn't really have a huge influence on storms, and we've seen from some work by people like Cameron Nixon that veer is not always a bad thing when you're trying to get violent tornadoes, when you're looking for violent tornadoes. So overall, looks like sort of a meager instability, low cape, sort of high shear setup. We can take a look at our low-level jet. I figure it's going to be in place pretty much every day. Yeah, this is Thursday. No semblance of a low-level jet there. That's why our photographs look pretty poor. And then Friday not so much here. Surprisingly, then we get big-time cyclogenesis here Saturday as that surface low, or as that upper trough ejects into the plains. You get westerly flow over the Rockies. You get a surface low to form as you get height falls on the lee of the Rockies. So definitely could see severe storms. Saturday to me is looking like the big day, if there is a big day in this stretch. Looks like to me Thursday and Friday are going to be sort of the transition days. Not really enough forcing. Forcing won't really be here yet, but we'll have a moist air mass in place. Then that forcing arrives, and it can get acted upon on Saturday. Sunday looks like the threat will move into the Mississippi River Delta sort of region, sort of Dixie Alley might be the place to be on Sunday. And that's going to be it, really, for this sort of stretch of severe weather. There is a little bit on the horizon on the long-range models after this trough. We get kind of another one to dive down into the plains after that. But overall, looking like a pretty active jet stream here for the middle of March. So chasing prospects looking pretty decent here over the next couple days. I think there will be multiple days of severe weather, but so we're going to start off with really kind of a conditional threat here, starting tomorrow, mostly in the overnight hours here in eastern Kansas. Very, very conditional threat here on Thursday. Likely not going to see much in the way of storms. Just there's going to be no forcing. Same thing on Friday. Wouldn't be surprised if this gets sort of downgraded here as we go through, just based on what I'm seeing on the models. Just doesn't look like we're going to have that trough eject fast enough to get a significant severe weather threat on Friday. But Saturday looks like the big day along that sort of Pacific Front dry line sort of composite boundary. Oklahoma, North Texas, definitely in the zone to watch, and then that'll move off to the east on Sunday. So if you live in any of these areas, definitely stay weather aware over the next several days into next week potentially. Could be a couple rounds of severe storms. I think we'll get multiple days of severe weather out of this. But definitely a lot of caveats, as we see with most early season severe weather setups. But will be a nice primer for chase season. Kind of shake the rust off for you chasers who haven't chased in a while. Kind of chases to shake the rust off. And we'll kind of see how this plays out. So might be back with more discussions later on in the week pertaining to the weekend threat. That might be the most significant threat out of these next few days, but I think we covered tomorrow pretty well. So if you're going out chasing, stay safe, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.